Camilla, good to see you.
Good
Thanks
to
for
see you, Paul.
thanks for making a bit of time to come and have a chat with me.
Of
Um,
course.
I was really intrigued by something that you said to me when we were talking a few weeks back. You said, "I want to fix collective amnesia." Now, why don't you explain to people what you mean by that, and why do you want to fix collective amnesia?
Okay, yeah, so we're diving we're diving right in. Well, thanks for inviting me on the podcast. I guess for the people that don't know me, I should maybe start by saying that I'm a cities and tech researcher and writer, and a founder of the knowledge management company Occasio Insights. And Occasio is a knowledge exchange platform for timeless insights and trusted sources. It's been more than 2,000 years since Plato said that knowledge is the rediscovering of our own insights, which is a great insight in its own to rediscover, right? But it's also something a lot of us can relate to when we're kind of frantically looking through notes or screenshots or bookmarks that we've saved, trying to find that nugget of truth that we know is somewhere in our repository, if we even remember to write it down at all. But that problem is also pretty big for businesses. Atlassian did some research finding that employees at Fortune 500 companies, they spend over a quarter of their time just searching for information. And that's really where Occasio comes in. So we help thought leaders and thought leading organizations hold on to their ground truths and keep track of their sources so that they can deliver their points with consistency and credibility. And so then they're not relying on, as I said, kind of constantly kind of rediscovering what they already know, and in that process, inevitably actually forgetting uh, a lot of what is core to their identity.
And why? Let me ask, why is that important to you particularly?
I think I feel, I guess, quite personally about this problem. I've always been someone that um, have picked up kernels of truths from lots of different places, and I hold them quite dear to my heart and my practice as a professional. And I've seen in business as I worked as I said, as a researcher and writer on cities and technology for 10 years or so, and I've seen really important points, evidence points, perspectives be forgotten, and then dug back out, and then be forgotten again, and it just frustrated me that we are tripping ourselves up in that manner, and that our decision making isn't as good as it could be, because we're kind of being blinded and forgetful, I guess, because there is a lot going on in the modern society, especially on the information front.
I mean, let me ask you about the corollary, the sort of the other side of that coin, if you like. I mean, as you just pointed out, I mean, it's been thousands of years we've been doing it the way we've been doing it and losing all that information. How much of a problem is it? I mean, I spend my entire life not being able to remember things, and I've always been a bit like that. It's not just because I'm old, but it hasn't actually necessarily had a massive negative impact on my life. I mean, why do you think it's so important?
I guess it depends on what your work and life
Mm.
is, right? So as I said, if you are an organization that um, positions itself as a thought leader, losing thoughts clearly isn't good, and is something that comes at a considerable cost. But also, if you're an individual and you present yourself to the world in a way that you want to be listened to, then both maintaining a level of consistency in the points that you make, but also being able to clearly trace and give credit where credit is due, I think is something that gives you credibility as an individual, in a time where I think credibility is becoming a bit of a rare currency.
Mm, mm. Yeah. So what you're basically saying is that that keeping track of all this stuff enables you to communicate better. Is that a fair summary?
I think it enables you to communicate better, but I think communication is kind of the surface level.
Mm,
It also enables you to connect what you communicate to your core values, like a deeper sense of mission, a foundation of information that drives your decision making and drives your actions. So I think it enables you to be a more intentional business and a more intentional
mm,
person,
mm,
both in what you say, but also what you do.
mm, mm. I mean, it's a very interesting point. Um, Let me ask you about the business that you've been building. I mean, I can see from, well, having spoken to you before and what you've just said, that this is very important to you. I mean, it strikes me it must have been quite a challenge to get this up and running.
Define challenge. What counts
Well,
as a challenge?
I meant hard. I mean, it struck me that what you've done is quite a difficult, because it's not your average software as a service product that you've kind of developed, is it? I mean, it seems to me well, I mean, I personally think it's a lot more interesting actually than
Oh,
a
thank
lot of
you.
the stuff that you see there.
So do I.
Because it's unusual, it's therefore more difficult. It strikes me as it's more difficult to get it all up and running, and but you've achieved that. I mean, is that how did you feel about that process?
Yeah. Um, I don't think I've ever shied away from difficult things. If anything, I kind of run towards them a little bit. I think with my background in studying cities and technology, I've actually come to kind of deeply value friction and complexity and difficulty. And I suppose I've also become quite distrusting of things that feel seamless and simple.
Yeah.
Um, so when this problem kind of felt important enough to address, it wasn't so much of a matter of like if the business needed to exist, but more how it could exist, and I guess taking the time that it does take to build something. I will say we're not. You see businesses today spinning out in 3 months, and we're a thoughtful business. We are taking our time, because we are dealing with quite a knotty problem that doesn't naturally kind of sit inside the SaaS vertical, the traditional SaaS vertical. But I think that also just makes it even more exciting,
And probably more interesting would be my.
and probably more interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I take a lot of motivation from that, and thinking actually, if I wasn't doing this, I don't think anyone would be. And before I even started the business, I thought about it for 3 years, and I kept thinking, surely someone is going to develop a tool that does this thing that I know is going to be really valuable going forward, and that I wish I'd had myself for the past 10 years, and in the end, when no one really seemed to pick up on that need and that opportunity, I thought, well, heck, I guess I have to do it.
Okay. So let's start at that point then. So you make a decision that you're going to fix the problem. What happened then?
And we fixed the problem, Paul.
On day one? You're
Yeah,
starting to sound like Donald
just
Trump.
get it done. Oh God, no. There's a reference I haven't been associated with before. Um, no, I mean, I guess you start once you understand the why, you start thinking about the how.
Hmm.
Um, and I took quite a long time thinking through both how the back end, you could say, of this system would need to fit together to enable both the scalability of knowledge, but also the scalability over time, but also the consolidation of silos into kind of one system. I spent quite a lot of time thinking about that back end piece, and then I spent quite a lot of time thinking about the front end piece of how this could be a tool that people could engage with. That, you know, I said I shy away from things being seamless, but I think when we are talking about digital products, the user experience is obviously incredibly important, and I think a good user experience can kind of then unlock that level of complexity where people can spend their brain power on the thinking rather than on the tool. Um, yeah, said we did a lot of work on that. It took it around to people that I thought would be interested in this solution, to customers. This must have spoken to about shown the process to about 100 people or so were involved in the very early stages as things started to crystallize. And then when it felt we were at the point where we were kind of ready to start building, we started building. We were still iterating and learning every day. I think, yeah, iteration is incredibly important for our business, and to any business really, but very much to ours. And it could be a lot better than it is now, but it is a lot better now than it was 6 months ago. So
I mean, that's one of the interesting things about businesses, I think, is that they're constantly evolving. I mean, my
yeah,
experience is they never stop. I mean, the only question is how much they're changing. I mean, they might change a lot or they might change a little, but there's always something that needs to be changed, or something. There's a sort of an adaptation process, an evolution process going on. Um,
well, yeah.
and what kind of sort of critical points have you? I mean, you've been on the journey for a while now. What sort of critical moments have you sort of had to deal with? You had any particular turning points when you've reached a fork in the road?
That's a good that's a good question. I think when we spoke last time, I think you did ask me this as well, and my response then is probably what it will be now, which is, I think when you engage with something like an iterative process and you consider everything always in flux, then I guess it's harder to kind of notice the roadblocks because you're always in that state of mind of being kind of ready to change and pivot and move. Um, I think this, if I have to point out, there's kind of been two. This is kind of on the customer front. I think we're kind of on this journey of kind of getting to the market that we really want to get into. But we realized quite early on that initially events and conferences were quite a good use case for us because you have
Right.
lots of people in a room all at once. Everyone contributes a key takeaway into a database of knowledge that's linked to the specific keynote or talk or panel discussion, and it creates value for everyone in that room and for the event organizers instantly. Um, Whereas if you're talking to an organization and you're talking about them starting to be more structured about how they capture this kind of data, the
Mm.
time to value is longer in that. So I think that realization that we would kind of have to step it up and starting with the low hanging fruit. I hate that term, but it's the right term for it. Starting with the low hanging fruit
Yeah.
and then kind of moving our way through the market or through the customer segments. And we're now kind of moved on to working more with um, expert networks, so like industry organizations that bring together people from lots of
Yeah.
different places who are all experts, that are all coming to share their wisdom, and that are missing kind of a neutral platform on which to do that. And they're missing a place to hold that wisdom in a way where it can also be handed over through different cycles of experts.
Mm. Well,
Um,
let me
yeah.
ask you about that because one of the things that what my experience has been is that lots of knowledge is kind of context specific. A great tip about how to do X, Y, or Z, whatever it is,
Yeah.
really depends on the context that you're in. So some things work in some situations, they don't in most other situations. And how do you sort of factor that in? Because that strikes me. Otherwise, I mean, that strikes me as a critical issue, really, because the way you would build a
Mm,
B2B business is very different from the way you'd build a B2C business. So the
mm.
ideas that are, my take is that they're context specific. I mean, how do you factor that in? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, this is where information gets really interesting,
Yeah,
right? Because any piece of information has to be seen in its context to be properly understood. But at the same time, it's when you extract pieces of information from lots of different sources and you put them together in unconventional ways. I mean, that's what thought leadership is, right?
yeah.
It's kind of remixing
Yeah, joining the
what
dots
we
in new ways,
it's
as they
joining the
say.
dots in new ways,
Yeah,
exactly. So you need both. And so so what Occasio kind of enables you to do is take those tips. I kind of call them the tips of the iceberg, but because every kernel of knowledge is linked to its metadata, going tracing that lineage back and seeing the kernel in its context is kind of possible by design, or encouraged by design. But then at the same time, you can also view it alongside these other pieces. But I think an important part of the platform is that element of human curation, if you will, where there's lots of platforms where you can just go in and get a quote, get an inspirational quote,
Yeah. Yeah.
Without that context. But here it's kind of uniquely points that you have picked out of your context, or as a business, like, there's this constant stream of information and knowledge flowing through a business, and you're picking from that river things that are important to your context. And that's also where it's fundamentally different from just asking an LLM chatbot to give you 10 talking points, because
Oh no,
those will be entirely devoid of that
yeah,
context.
and that's the thing I wanted to
Yeah,
ask you about is you mentioned the role. There's, I suppose my question is, what's the role of the kind of human bit and the AI bit, and how do they work together? I mean, how does that factor into the way you do things? Because as you've
yeah.
just pointed out, it seems to me to be quite important.
So what would be quite
Well,
important?
the two things working together. So
Yeah,
the
yeah,
kind
of
of people
course.
working with the technology is the bit that's, I think, is the interesting bit.
Yeah. Um, so we integrate kind of large language model capabilities in doing things like source fetching. So if
Yeah,
you're reading through a document and you want to extract some points from it, you don't really want to, unless you absolutely have to, you don't want to have to spend time on things like, well, getting the metadata, but also things like tagging.
yeah, yeah,
We have quite a strict tagging system that you don't really have to worry about. That's kind of assigned by the LLM. You can override it, but it's inherently assigned by the LLM. And then the data goes into kind of a vector database, which discovers what pieces of information are related to each other based on both what the thing says and then the context that that thing sits in and the metadata that goes along with it. Um, so we kind of on the human is the curator in terms of deeming what is important and why it is important,
right,
and then the AI supports with the organization of that knowledge and the tagging, the management of it. And then once you have this structured database of information, then obviously we're using LLMs to help you get kind of trend summaries, trend analysis, trend summaries
right,
of what's in your database. And you can even, imagine training an LLM on your knowledge
yeah,
base,
yeah,
or kind of linking this particular piece of your knowledge base together with all of the other tools that a
yeah,
business will have. Like they'll have a CRM system as well that they would want probably to link up with that. So this becomes another source for kind of company specific LLM to learn from that your competitors won't have.
yeah. And what sort of impact are you trying to have with this? I mean, where are you? Give us a sense of the direction of travel. I mean, I get your point about, the kind of collective amnesia. You're trying to prevent that. I thought it was actually quite a very clever way of saying that, actually. But where are you going with it? What is it you want to achieve here? What would success look like?
I I want us to I want us to have a positive impact on the world, but especially in how the world engages with information, with critical
Mm,
thinking, with thought leadership. Um, I think we live in a time where it's not easy to kind of go to bat for thoughtfulness, and everyone seems to be rushing
mm,
to want to leave their thinking to the machines. I guess we want to be a counter movement to that, or we want to make sure that, I guess, in that process, and as we digitize and artificially intelligentize, that's not a word, I just invented that. but as we go through that process of integrating advanced digital technologies into our businesses, that we also remember the value of taking the time to think. Remember that even like a single sentence, well phrased, can weigh
Yep.
more actually on the decision making balances than all of this big data we have over here. So I guess we want to be that counter movement that I think will make the overall output a lot more productive and um, effective for kind of the long-term resiliency
Yeah.
of our economic environment.
Yeah. And let me ask you about one of the points you've just made. I mean, I can see exactly where you're going, or the point you made. I totally get that. What I also hear from lots of other people is the importance of storytelling
Mm,
and in the way we communicate. And in my view, broadly, is that business is not that great at storytelling. I mean, some businesses are very good at it, but lots of businesses are not very good at storytelling. I mean, how do you see the kind of capture and the curation of tacit knowledge, insights, the sorts of things that you're talking about? How
mm.
does that relate, do you think, to
Yeah,
storytelling and how that and the way businesses need to be better at storytelling? I mean, is there a
yeah.
connection there? Do you see that?
I feel like this is a leading question, but
I
I
would never
appreciate the
ask a
setup.
leading question.
Yeah, I very much appreciate the setup. Of course, I mean, you said yourself earlier about the connecting the dots, and effective storytelling is about connecting the dots. So
Yeah.
Occasio is named after a Greek goddess, the Greek goddess of kind of the opportune moment, and the Roman goddess of the opportune moments, because the Greeks had their own kind of deities, and in Greece, Occasio was Kairos, and Kairos sat alongside logos, ethos, and pathos, which are the three elements you need for effective argument. So logos is, you tell a story, you want to have a data point, like 25% of people's time in organizations is just wasted looking
Yeah.
for information that already exists somewhere. Then you want to have an element of emotion, which is the pathos piece. So I could say, isn't it frustrating how you don't that feeling, you're like going through your notes and where is it, like that? We've all
Yeah.
been that moment, and it's on the tip of our tongue, but it's just also lost to memory. And then you want to have an element of ethos, which is your credibility. Which is where, being able to say, well, that source came from there, that source came from there. And generally when I speak based on well-founded information that I'm intimately familiar with, and I present consistently in that manner, whether as an individual or as a business. And then Kairos is the opportune, that's the right time, because it doesn't matter that you have all those elements together. If you say it at the wrong time, it can
Yeah.
still fall to deaf ears. Um, and yeah, so then in Rome, Kairos became Occasio, which is why we're called Occasio. So this platform is very much about storytelling and about helping people keep those points to hand that they will need, or help organizations keep those points to hand that they need to tell good stories, tell consistent stories, tell stories that weave together lots of different types of evidence points, whether they are more emotional and based around customer testimonials, or
Mm.
fact-based and based around, you know, product stats and research highlights and
Yeah.
whatnot.
Yeah. Let's move on to the job of the CEO. I mean, you present to me as somebody who enjoys being the CEO.
Yeah, I guess I do. I guess I do. Yeah, it's uh, it's a funny one, really. I think I present as a person that has plans and visions and want to see them executed. And that's always been me, whether I have been in the CEO role with a CEO hat on, or whether I've been a student intern. Um, but I guess now the benefit of being a CEO is that there isn't actually a CEO sitting on top of me, um, telling me to stay in my lane. It's all my lane now.
To so that's quite an interesting. I mean, to what extent are you trying to prove somebody wrong, if you like, somebody that said you should stay in your lane and you just decide I don't want to stay in my lane? I mean, is that part of what makes up the kind of motivation here?
No, it's not about proving anyone wrong. I think it's just realizing, and now that I am a CEO, I see this as well with my team. Obviously, it's realizing that, I think any endeavor requires leadership,
Mm.
and being a leader means also knowing what not to do and knowing what to prioritize when. So yeah, I think it's more a realization that actually to get the blue ocean that I have always sought in my practice, I would need to step out, I guess, in front, because otherwise, yeah, otherwise there will always be someone in front of you, and you, if you don't follow them, then you're not actually helping that business that you're working in, and then there's really,
Mm.
yeah,
I
then it's
mean,
counterproductive, even if what
yeah,
you're doing is
yeah.
um, out of the goodness of your heart.
Yeah. You also make an interesting point there because what you're saying is you've made a commitment. I mean, you're after the blue ocean, and I know what that's all about. It's about not having thousands of competitors, and yours is a very different proposition. So I can see why the blue ocean thing is important to you. It's important to lots of businesses. It's just that not many of them have found them. You've found one to a great
Mm.
extent. But the other side to that commitment is the risk involved. I mean, how do you
Yeah.
feel about that?
Yeah, sometimes I feel like I've set out to sea and I look over my shoulder and no one followed. So the thing about going out in the blue ocean is it can be a very lonely place. Whether you're weathering a storm or stuck in the doldrums. Yeah, but again, you can't. I mean, you can't have everything all the time. And I think the excitement is what land you might eventually find, and then who will come move in there with you and build those castles in the sky. Now we're in the sky. The
Yeah.
metaphors are getting incredibly mixed up now.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
it's very interesting. I think you see that making a commitment is what really drives learning. I mean, in an academic sense, you can go to a lecture and listen to things and write essays. That's all fine. Nothing wrong with that. The thing about building a business is that you have to make a commitment to do something, and then if that might work or it might not work, or it might be somewhere in the middle. And that's where real learning comes from, in my view. It's making a commitment and then having to deal with the consequences of that.
yeah.
That strikes me as those situations are very powerful learning experiences. Does that sort of resonate with your experience?
Oh yeah, entirely. Um, yeah, I've learned tons on this journey so far, and there's still so much I don't know. There's so much I don't know that I don't know. Um, but I love learning. I've always sought to understand things I didn't understand before. And so that part of it suits me, I guess, quite well.
Mm. And
Um,
you also talked about how strategy is about doing some things and not doing other things.
yeah.
That also evolves, doesn't it? Customers'
Oh yeah.
expectations change, the technology change, lots of stuff change.
Yeah.
And there's two ways to deal with that. You can either allow those changes to drive you, or you can drive the changes. I mean, what's your take on that? I mean, would you say you're fairly proactive about driving that adaptation process, or are you reactive? I mean, what's your feeling about that?
I'd probably sit somewhere in the middle because you have to be prepared to listen
Hmm.
and react. But then, as I said, sometimes when you're not really getting the feedback, then I think that's when you then have to be proactive and probe and like try to go in that direction until you start getting that feedback. And at that point you can course correct. And I think that's why doing is to so like I think the worst thing you can do is stagnate or kind of be paralyzed by those challenges of that decision making process, because you won't learn anything until you take those steps, and then you'll find out if the ground is stable or if it's going to swallow you whole. And then hopefully, if you sense yourself sinking in a little bit too deep, it won't be too late to get out and try something else.
And to what extent does kind of creativity play into that process? I mean, you talk about running into problems and then trying to figure out ways around them. I mean, to what extent is your kind of creative or the creative part of you, playing out in the way that you figure out ways, solutions to those problems, ways forward, better ways to adapt, change, and so on?
Yeah, I mean, I think creativity is incredibly important. My training is in the creative sector, and there's a lot of tools you learn when you study something like architecture, to help you work through unknowns and to kind of iterate with feedback and so on and so forth. But also just, I think the more creative you can be, the more imaginative you can be, the better you are at drawing inspiration from lots of different places, the more likely it is that when you hit that roadblock, that you'll be able to find a way around it, because you might think, well, we could blow it up. Could we walk over it? Could we dig under it? Could we take 10 steps back and 2 steps to the side and then go forward? Like, what if we tango past it? Maybe it'll magically, disappear if we get put our dance shoes. Like, it's yeah, I think the creativity can be applied in many different ways, but navigating the business landscape is certainly one of them.
Mm. I mean, I've always felt that it's, if you can't think creatively, you're not really going to make a lot of progress. Um, maybe that's just my experience. I don't know, but
Well, I think it depends. That probably depends on the industry a little bit, doesn't it? I think there's a lot of businesses that are run probably by people that have a very narrow sense of imagination, but they they've just got so much power behind them that they don't have to really worry about the roadblocks as much as the rest of us. They can just bulldoze through them, and then that serves to them as proof that their methods um, are working, even if there might have been a more elegant way to get things done.
yeah, yeah. And on that journey that you've been, I mean, what sort of things would you say have pushed you out of your comfort zone?
I I struggle with this sort of thing. I really like presenting on the basis of, I guess you could say, knowledge. I like presenting content rich, making content rich contributions to the world. I don't love talking about how I work or why I work, or um, even what my I don't even know that my personal motivations are of such importance, to the mission that we're actually on. Um, but we do also live in a time when, real estate online is very crowded space to be in, and there's a lot of advice that would suggest that as a CEO you have to put yourself out there, and it almost doesn't matter what you share as long as you share.
Mm.
And yeah, I struggle with that, and I think I also haven't quite compromised myself on that front yet either, at least not fully. I'm trying to kind of balance that, but it's something I'm regularly struggling with figuring out how to balance.
Mm. Well, it's not easy, so it's not totally surprising that struggling with it. So that
Yeah.
would be my response to that. Um, and the other thing that I think is particularly important about the job of the CEO is that you end up being the kind of the tip of the spear, the front of the at the front of the queue when problems come along.
Yeah.
I mean, so how? I mean, how do you get through those? I mean, they're almost inevitable crises that happen when you're on this kind of journey. I mean, what's your take on facing down those sorts of things?
I face it down with grit and perseverance. I think I've been brought up with a very kind of a core uh, it's an idea. I don't know if idea is the right word for it, but I have this core belief that everything is figure outable.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And you yeah they and problems will arise, and they'll be really uncomfortable. Like I don't like problems in the business. I don't like dealing with challenges that might be coming at us from customers or the market or peers, wherever they might be coming from, or um, accounting, whatever it might be, um, because it does, yeah, represent like a dicey moment. But I also know the only way through that is through it. You just got to grab the bull by
Well, where
the
does
horns
that
and
belief come from? I mean, that
work it
idea that
out.
it's everything's fixable, everything's figure outable, as it was the phrase you used. Where does
Mm.
that belief come from?
I think I've just been quite fortunate, like ever since I was quite young, when I've been facing difficulties, I have also learned to that I can get through them.
Mm.
Like with obviously with the support like of my parents, I guess, and a good upbringing, like a very fortunate upbringing. Growing up in Denmark, I think has been. I'm very glad I grew up in Denmark. I think in Denmark, people are, or children, even at quite a young age, are
Mm.
taught to ask critical questions, and are taught that if they apply, I guess if you could say apply themselves, it sounds awful, but because they're taught that they're worthy and that their opinions matter, and that if they study and have something they want to share with the classroom, or the world, that is valid. So I think your sense of worth is cultivated at quite a young age, and the tools you get at quite a young age to figure things out, like access to things like libraries and good education, free education, that all
And to what
it's just
extent,
very valuable.
yeah, I mean, I totally get that. To what extent would you say that the product that you've developed reflects that? Because I mean, it seems to me that your platform is about
Yeah,
validating,
yeah,
recognizing other people's kind of questions, insights, thoughts, ideas.
yeah,
I mean, so I
yeah.
mean, you having just said that, I mean, what was going through my mind was,
Mhm.
oh, that's the product you've built.
I know. Figure that. Yeah, yeah, you're not wrong. I think I've been a person that has been interested in these subject matters for a very, very long time. I think it's very inherent to me, um, and it's just delightful to get to I guess to have figured that part out, and to get to now
Mm.
work on something that I am very passionate about, and that I believe is important, for my kind of community and my fellow human beings to get engaged with as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, I totally get that. Let me touch on a couple of other things before we wind up. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
always interested in what people have learned from their experiences. I mean, you've had a number of success. Well, the platform itself is a success. Um, I mean, what has that? What have those successes revealed to you about yourself and about your business?
I think each success does become a point of validation. It becomes like a little motivator for keeping going, and it becomes, I guess, proof in some ways that what you're doing is working in one way or another, even when something that even if you go through a period where you're not experiencing a lot of successes, then one comes along, and then you you lean into that. Yeah, I don't know if that's a very good answer to
Well,
your
it sounds
to
to
your
me. I
question
mean,
there.
I've had those periods when nothing's gone right, and then something does go right, and I think it's absolutely marvelous. I mean,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it really motivates me when I've come out of the dip, which has been
yeah,
terrible, and then something good happens. You think, oh God, thank God, I can. I can move forward again. So, but let me ask you about the flip side. I mean, obviously, there have been failures, there have been mistakes along the way. I mean, what have those revealed to you?
I think it's just all inevitable, isn't it? I think whether it's a success or a failure, it becomes part of the journey, and you can't really have one without the other, because if you don't experience, I guess, failures, how do you recognize the success? And if you don't have successes, then I think we calibrate our sense of the status quo to that collection of experiences. Um, I think the failure might reveal that there is something that does need to be recalibrated. That there's there's something that can be kind of reworked. Whereas maybe a success, as I said, kind of shows you that what is working. But the thing is, though, that what worked last year might not work next year, and
Yeah.
what led to a failure one time could lead to a success another time. Like
And
it
that's the
goes back to
tricky
your
bit.
point about being context specific.
Yeah.
I really I'm really not a fan of like very strict playbooks for like, this is how we do business and this is what's working and this is, as you can probably tell from this conversation, I think the core approach is the iteration, the thoughtfulness, and the constant kind of having your radars out and listening, and then adjusting based on that as you go along. Um,
I mean, I think you make a
yeah,
really good point about the two things are just the two sides of the same coin.
yeah,
And they change. You're absolutely right. I mean, sometimes things work and sometimes they don't. And a lot of that is dependent on the context. It's not dependent on the thing
and
necessarily.
a lot of that is out of your hands as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. The other thing that's interesting though I mean, we tend to think of failure or mistakes as things that we've done.
Yeah.
I call those errors of commission, things that we've done that you think, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. But there's another side to making mistakes, which is I would call errors of omission, which is I really should have done that and I didn't.
Mm.
Which of those has had bigger impact, do you think, on you and your
Probably errors of omission. I think we're always, I
yeah,
think the faults or the that will bite us the hardest are based on the things we didn't do.
yeah,
Uh, as per my earlier point, I think when we do something, it can usually be turned into some kind of upside. Like it's rare to do something that doesn't teach us something that we can then take on to the next stage or turn into something good at another point in time. Um, yeah, not doing things is where you both miss those opportunities for learning, but you obviously also miss the opportunities for forward momentum. And that is actually, I think, as a challenge as a CEO of a relatively small company, that time is scarce,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and it's hard. It is hard to do everything, and I think some of those things I don't have time to do, or that are still on the drawing board that need to be done. I do have this thought of like, well, what opportunities am I leaving on the table because I haven't had time to execute on this front yet. Um, but yeah, you also never know what could have been, right? So it's a bit of a moot point to question it, because you
that
can't you
stuff
can't live
about
two lives.
no,
So
that's right. But it's that gap, isn't it? But it's all the stuff that you don't know. I mean, we tend to focus on what we do know for obvious reasons, but
yeah.
actually, it's the stuff that we don't know that I often think is more interesting, actually, and more profound. But anyway, one last question before we wind up.
Hmm.
If you were to, well, what advice would you offer to somebody wanting to do something or starting out on a journey similar to yours or wanting to do something similar to you? What would you say to them?
So I guess I didn't set out thinking I want a business. What kind of business should I build? What kind of problem can I address? And then build. I think that there are a lot of people setting up businesses where the objective is the business, and then the problem is almost secondary, or they can become very passionate about it. But I obviously came at it from a different perspective, where it was the problem that needed solving, and the vehicle to solving that problem was setting up a business and doing it that way. I think for people that come at it from that angle, I would say, I guess be sure that this is a problem that you want to work on for years and years, and even when you're the only one in the ocean and no one around you seems to care, like you know why you care. I think, as to your point, Paul, about how this problem is so close to my heart that it's probably been following me since a very young age, which I've only been realizing like along. I didn't realize that right at the start when I set out on this. But even then, as I did say, I had been thinking about this product for about 3 years and not grown tired of it, and that was kind of an indication for me that it was worth giving it my full attention.
And are
And
you
then I
glad that,
would,
are you glad that you did?
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, thinking about the alternative, I think if I hadn't done this, then I would have been more upset at having not done it than I am upset at having done it. Yeah. Um, yeah. And then I would say, like, just don't. I mean, everyone will say it's not easy to start a business,
Mm.
and it isn't. But I think it is a lot easier if you go into it expecting it to be hard and unglamorous. You know, everyone would love to be that business that becomes an instant success overnight and ends up on, well, I don't know if everyone, but I think a lot of startup founders dream of becoming a success overnight and ending up in front of the cover of the glossy magazines and on the main stage at Tech UK's annual conference or whatever it might be. And there's a little bit of that, there are small moments of glory in there, but a lot of it is just getting up, sitting in front of your computer, doing things that nobody cares about yet, trying to reach people that are very busy that also don't care, until you break through to them, and doing that day after day after day until something gives, or kind of taking an inch every day, until you've taken a mile. So if you approach it with that mindset of expecting the journey to be not always hard, but certainly long, and at times tiring, but then I think you're going to be able to brace it more easily, I guess, because the expectations are well calibrated from the
Yeah.
outset.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really good piece of advice, actually, Camilla. I
Oh,
mean,
good.
there's a famous president, I think, I can't remember which one it was. One of the American presidents said, perseverance is everything, which is basically what you just said, isn't it? That,
Yeah.
it's not tremendously glamorous, mostly. I mean, occasionally it's nice when,
Yeah. I mean, if you had, a library where you could save such quotes from presidents so that you could now name both the quote exactly and the president
yeah,
exactly,
I
wouldn't that be
should probably
wonderful?
need one of them, don't I?
Yeah,
Thank
exactly.
you for coming and sharing the story with us, Camilla. I mean, I found that absolutely fascinating, and it's a really interesting. The platform I actually think is a really valuable piece of technology that you've built because, I mean, we've talked about this in the past. I think the big gap in the knowledge world is tacit knowledge. It's the stuff that is in here that we don't capture, and that, as you point out, we lose.
Yeah.
And that if we could start to capture that, you know, so much the better, really. So thanks for making a bit of time to come and have a chat, and good luck going forward. I mean, I'm sure it will be a big, well, it's already a success. I'm sure it will be an even bigger success, and I look forward to hearing about it at some point.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much for inviting me on, and thank you to your viewership for sticking it out to
A
this
pleasure,
point.
an absolute pleasure. See you soon.
See you. Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Bye.